My name is Sophia Thompson. I'm 32. It was 7:43 in the morning on a Tuesday in March when my mother called me to tell me I was not invited to my own brother's wedding, the wedding being held in the penthouse I had gifted him 6 months earlier. I remember exactly where I was standing. 41st floor of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan, coffee cup in hand, watching the East River catch the early light. I had a client presentation in 40 minutes. My phone buzzed, and I saw her name. And something in my chest tightened the way it always did, the way it had been tightening for 26 years. Sophia. My mother's voice was smooth, unhurried, the way it always was when she had already decided how a conversation would go. I need you to understand something before you hear it from someone else. Good morning to you too, Mom. Ethan's wedding is Saturday. The guest list is finalized. You're not on it. I set the coffee cup down on the window ledge. Excuse me? You heard me. This is a small, intimate ceremony. 40 people, family and close friends. I'm his sister. You've been difficult, Sophia. You know how Ethan feels right now. You've been stirring up things that don't need to be stirred, asking questions about Grandma's property that are just, they're hurtful. You're making this about yourself when it's his day. Something in me went very still. I am asking questions about the land Grandma left me. That is not stirring things up. That is asking about something that belongs to me. Her voice dropped one full register, the way it did right before she said the thing she actually meant. Nothing belongs to you that we didn't allow. That's what you've never understood. You live your fancy New York life and you forget that this family took care of you. This family gave you everything. You didn't give me anything. I worked a dinner shift at Patty's Diner 5 nights a week for 3 years in high school to pay for my own college applications. I paid my own tuition. I built every single thing I have. See? That attitude. That is exactly why you're not invited. And then she hung up. I stood there for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. I know because my phone screen stayed lit. The East River kept moving below me, indifferent, silver gray, and relentless. My presentation materials were open on my laptop. The coffee was getting cold. Before I tell you what happened next, before I take you through the years that led to that phone call and the days that followed it, if stories about standing up for yourself mean something to you, if you've ever had someone treat your life like it was an inconvenience to them, please hit like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and what time is it there. It matters to me more than you know, because this story is not just mine. Let me take you back 22 years to a Saturday afternoon in June when I was 10 years old and my grandmother's house smelled like butter and cinnamon and something older underneath. Something like cedar and old paper that I always thought of as the smell of things that lasted. Grandmother Thompson, Eleanor to anyone who knew her, Gran to me, lived on 6 acres outside Beaufort, South Carolina, in a white clapboard house with a wraparound porch and 2 ancient live oak trees in the front yard whose roots had buckled the driveway so many times that my grandfather had eventually given up resurfacing it and just left the roots to do what roots do. Behind the house there was a small pond the color of dark tea, ringed with cattails and the sound of red-winged blackbirds in the mornings. I loved that land with a fierceness I couldn't have explained at 10. It felt like it breathed, like it had been waiting for me specifically. That afternoon, Gran was teaching me how to make biscuits. Not from a recipe, but from feel. From the pressure of your hands in the dough, from the sound the flour made when you sifted it. You'll know when it's right, she told me. Flour on her forearms up to the elbow, silver hair pinned back with 2 tortoiseshell clips. Your hands will know before your brain does. That's how most important things work. We ate the biscuits on the porch with blackberry jam she'd put up the summer before, watching the oaks move in the afternoon heat. Gran, I said, who's going to get this house when you die? She looked at me the way adults do when a child says something that surprises them by being direct. Then she smiled, and it was the kind of smile that didn't perform anything. It just was. You, she said simply. This land is yours, Sophia. I've already decided. What about Ethan? Ethan has other things. She set her biscuit down on the plate and looked at the oaks, and her voice went somewhere quieter. I want you to remember something. When things get complicated, and they will get complicated, baby, because that's what families do, I need you to remember that I see you, not what you could do for somebody else, not what grade you got, or whether you were helpful enough or quiet enough or took up the right amount of space. I see you. And whatever happens, I've made sure of it. I didn't fully understand what she meant. I was 10. I understood the biscuits and the blackbirds and the fact that she had said the land was mine. I carry that afternoon with me everywhere I go. It weighs almost nothing and holds almost everything. Gran died when I was 19, in the February of my freshman year at Hudson Valley Community College, where I had enrolled on a partial scholarship supplemented by $14,200 I had saved from 3 years of dinner shifts at Patty's Diner on Route 9 in Greencastle. Tip money mostly, stuffed into a mason jar I kept in the back of my closet and counted on Sunday nights when the house was quiet. I drove the 9 hours home from college in a borrowed car for the funeral. It was the coldest February in 30 years, the kind of cold that got into the car no matter what you did with the heat. The reading of the will happened 4 days after the funeral in a conference room at a law office on Broad Street in Beaufort. Aldridge and Monroe. Dark wood paneling. The smell of carpet cleaner under something floral. The attorney was a man named Gerald Aldridge, in his 60s, with wire-rimmed glasses and the careful delivery of someone who had witnessed too many rooms go wrong. Gran had left the 6-acre property at 14 Merritt Pond Road, Beaufort, South Carolina, including the house, the 2 outbuildings, and the land itself, assessed at $147,000 in the most recent county appraisal, to me, Sophia Marie Thompson. She had left my brother Ethan $22,000 in a brokerage account. She had left my parents her furniture and her car and her jewelry, all told approximately $31,000 in value. My mother's face when Gerald Aldridge read my name did not change. That was the part that frightened me. She didn't flinch. She didn't look surprised. She just looked at the table, and then she looked at my father, and something passed between them that I saw but could not read. Ethan, who was 22 and already the kind of man who took up space in a room like he had reserved it in advance, said, "That's not right." Gerald Aldridge looked at him over his glasses. "It's what the will states." Gran was confused at the end. Everyone knows that. The will was executed 14 months ago, Mr. Thompson, when your grandmother was in full cognitive health, per the attached physician's certification. My mother put her hand on Ethan's arm. "We'll discuss this at home." I should have known from the silence on the drive back that they were not going to accept it. I was 19 and exhausted with grief, and I told myself the silence was just sadness. I told myself we would all get through this together. I was so spectacularly wrong. 3 weeks after the funeral, my father called me at school. He said they needed me to sign some paperwork related to the estate. Property transfer documents, he said. Routine things. He would mail them. "What kind of transfer?" I asked. "Just formalities. Gerald Aldridge prepared them. Just sign where the tabs are." I asked if I should have my own attorney look at them. He laughed. It was a short, compressed sound, like something being folded. "You don't need an attorney, Sophia. We're your family. Just sign the papers." I said I wanted to understand what I was signing first. The phone went quiet for a moment. Then, "You know, this is the problem. This has always been the problem with you. You can't just trust the people who love you. You have to make everything difficult." That sentence, I heard it so many times over the following years that I could recite it in my sleep. You make everything difficult. It was the sentence my family used whenever I asked a question they didn't want to answer, whenever I needed something they didn't want to give, whenever I existed in a way that was inconvenient for them. I never signed the papers. My father stopped calling for 3 months. When he came back, it was to tell me that Grand's estate had been resolved and that I should stop asking about the property because it was settled. He did not explain what that meant. He changed the subject to Ethan's new job at a marketing firm in Charleston and how well Ethan was doing and how proud they were. I filed it away. I was 19 in my first year of college, working double shifts at a diner on weekends to stay enrolled. I did not have the resources to push, but I did not forget. The next 8 years were mine, built from scratch, built from nothing anyone gave me. I transferred to CUNY after my associate's degree, majored in computer science, graduated with a 3.8 GPA at 23. I took a job at a tech startup in Brooklyn, doing data analysis for $38,000 a year, sharing a 2-bedroom apartment in Bushwick with 2 other women, and eating a lot of rice and frozen vegetables, and not minding it much because the work was interesting and the city was alive and I was building something. By 26, I had my first professional certification in machine learning strategy. By 28, I was being recruited. By 30, I was a senior AI strategy consultant at Meridian Group, working with companies managing anywhere from $40 million to $400 million in assets, helping them understand what artificial intelligence could and could not do for their operations, which, as it turned out, was a more nuanced and more valuable question than most of them had expected. My salary at 30 was $178,000 base, plus performance bonuses that in a good year brought it to just over $210,000. I sent my parents a Christmas card every year. I called on birthdays. I kept the connection thin and maintained, the way you keep a door you're not sure you want to close entirely. Then Ethan got engaged. Her name was Camille Beaumont Walsh, and she came from a family with a vacation home in the Hamptons and a permanent residence on the Upper East Side, and the engagement party was in the private dining room of a restaurant in Tribeca, where the tasting menu was $340 per person. My mother called me to tell me about it with an undisguised breathlessness, the way she talked about Ethan's milestones like they were personally earned achievements. "Isn't it wonderful?" she said. "It's wonderful," I agreed. "They're thinking a summer wedding. Somewhere special. A penthouse venue, maybe, or a rooftop." A pause. And then, because I was apparently not yet wise enough to hear the engine behind the question, "Do you know anyone? In your New York connections? Who might know of something?" I did know someone. I knew the Hargrove building on West 57th Street, where a client of mine had a penthouse with a wraparound terrace and a view of Central Park that on clear days extended north all the way to the reservoir. The client was relocating to London and had been asking whether I knew anyone who might want to purchase or long-term lease the space at below market value as a favor to someone he trusted. I arranged the purchase. I put down $280,000 of my own savings. I gifted the penthouse to my brother as a wedding gift. I want you to understand the size of that gesture. That was the majority of my liquid savings at the time. It was money I had accrued over 10 years of working at the highest level I could reach. It was mine in a way that very little else had been mine. I did it because I was still, despite everything, trying to belong to this family. I was still trying to earn something they had never actually offered. 6 months later, my mother called me at 7:43 on a Tuesday morning and told me I was not invited to the wedding. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. I stood at that window and I watched the river, and I thought about the land in Beaufort and the oaks and the small pond, the color of dark tea, and something in me that had been patient for a very long time began to sharpen. I called the office of Gerald Aldridge at 8:15 that morning. A receptionist answered. I asked for Mr. Aldridge. She told me he had retired in 2019 and that the practice had been taken over by his associate, a woman named Patricia Monroe. I asked to speak with Patricia Monroe. I was put on hold for 4 minutes. Then, "This is Patricia Monroe." "Miss Monroe, my name is Sophia Thompson. My grandmother, Eleanor Thompson, was a client of this office. She passed in 2009. I was the named beneficiary of her property at 14 Merritt Pond Road, Beaufort." I have reason to believe that property was transferred without my knowledge or consent after the will was executed. I'd like to know if your office has any records related to that transaction. A pause that was maybe 3 seconds long but felt much longer. Ms. Thompson, she said slowly, can you come to my office? The Aldridge and Monroe office was still on Broad Street, but it had been renovated since I'd last been inside. Lighter wood, better lighting, a receptionist behind a curved desk. It smelled like fresh coffee and the ghost of the carpet cleaner I remembered. Patricia Monroe was in her mid-50s, compact and precise, with close-cropped silver hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain. She shook my hand with the firm grip of someone who had been in rooms where things went wrong and had learned not to flinch. She closed the door behind us. I'm going to tell you something, she said, and I want you to let me finish before you respond. I told her I would. Gerald Aldridge kept extraordinarily thorough files. When he retired, he transferred all active and inactive client records to this office. When you called this morning, I pulled your grandmother's file because I remembered it specifically. I remembered it because Gerald flagged it. Flagged it how? She opened a manila folder on the desk between us. In 2010, 14 months after your grandmother's death and after the will was properly executed in your favor, a deed transfer was recorded with the Beaufort County Register of Deeds, transferring the property at 14 Merritt Pond Road from the estate of Eleanor Thompson to a Robert and Laura Thompson jointly, and then, 8 weeks later, from Robert and Laura Thompson to a third-party buyer, a developer named Carson Realty, LLC, for $180,000. My hands were in my lap. I pressed them flat against my thighs. The deed transfer from the estate used a signature identified as yours, Sophia. Your signature as the estate beneficiary consenting to the transfer. I never signed anything. I know. Her voice was level. Gerald knew too. He flagged the file because he had not prepared any such transfer document, and he had not been contacted about it. The signature on the transfer deed does not match the signature on the original will acknowledgement you signed in his office in February 2009. She paused. Gerald reported his concerns to the Beaufort County Register's office at the time. He was told the matter would be reviewed. As far as I know, it was never pursued. I looked at the folder. What happened to the $180,000? Patricia Monroe's expression did not change. County property records show Carson Realty, LLC completed the purchase in the spring of 2010. The proceeds would have gone to whoever held the account used in the transaction. We don't have that information, but Gerald attached a note to the file. She turned the folder so I could read it. The note was in Gerald Aldridge's handwriting, ink slightly faded, dated August 2010, R. Thompson, Casino Accounts, Myrtle Beach. Spoke with T. Fairchild at First Coast Bank. Account activity, spring 2010 deposit of $162,000, net after fees. Withdrawals over 18 months, $159,400. Casino floor records, Palmetto Grand, on request. I read the note twice, 3 times. The words did not change. He documented it, I said. He documented everything he could without a formal investigation. She folded her hands. Sophia, Gerald Aldridge passed away in 2021. Before he died, he left instructions with this office. Specifically, he left instructions about your file. She reached into the folder and produced a sealed envelope, cream-colored, with my name written on the front in handwriting I recognized immediately, though I hadn't seen it in 13 years. Not Gerald Aldridge's handwriting, my grandmother's. I sat in my car in the parking lot on Broad Street for 45 minutes before I opened it. I don't know exactly why. I think I needed a minute with the outside of it first. The envelope, the loops of her handwriting, the deliberateness of a woman who had been gone for 13 years reaching forward through time to hand me something. When I opened it, my hands were shaking. The letter was 2 pages, written in the same careful cursive as the envelope, dated September 2008, 5 months before she died, 14 months before anyone tried to take what she'd left me. Dear Sophia, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Robert and Laura have already done what I was afraid they would do. I am sorry I couldn't stop it while I was here. I tried. I spoke to your father directly in the summer of 2007 and told him plainly that this land was yours and that I had documented it with Gerald and that any attempt to change that would be a legal matter, not a family one. He smiled and nodded the way he does, and I knew then he had already decided he wouldn't listen. Do you remember the afternoon we made biscuits? You were 10 years old. You asked me who would get the house when I died, and I told you, you. I meant it then, and I mean it now, and I have spent the last 2 years making sure it cannot be undone. The original deed of title designating you as sole beneficiary of 14 Merritt Pond Road, Beaufort, South Carolina, is on file with Gerald Aldridge at Aldridge and Monroe, 214 Broad Street, Beaufort. The copy enclosed here is your personal record. Inside this envelope, certified copy of the deed of title with my notarized signature and Gerald's seal. A letter from Dr. Marcus Webb confirming my full cognitive capacity as of September 2008. Bank statement from First Coastal Savings showing the property tax payment history in your name, backdated to 2006. A written statement from my neighbor, Harriet Culbreth, who witnessed your father visit my home in July 2007, and can describe the conversation that followed. Do not show this to your parents. Do not let Ethan know you have it. Wait until Gerald or his successor tells you the time is right. Gerald will know. He has been waiting with me. You are not a spare part, Sophia. You are not a resource. You are the one who stayed up until 2 in the morning studying, who saved every dollar from that diner job, who never once asked me for anything except my time. That is not nothing. That is everything. The land is yours. The oaks are yours. The pond is yours. I made sure of it. Come home when you're ready. All my love, always your Gran, and I will always find you, little star. I read it 4 times. Then I sat in the silence of that parking lot, and I let myself cry for the first time in a very long time. Not from grief, or not only from grief, from something that felt like being caught after a very long fall. From the understanding that someone had seen me clearly, had known exactly what would happen, and had spent years quietly preparing for it. She had seen them, she had seen me, she had done what she could. I called Patricia Monroe from the parking lot. I read it, I said. I know, she said. Gerald told me to be ready for this call. What do we do now? Now, she said, we file a complaint with the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office for forgery, identity theft, and grand larceny. We contact the Register of Deeds to begin the process of challenging the 2010 transfer, and we request the financial records from First Coast Bank and Palmetto Grand Casino that Gerald documented in his notes. A pause. This will take some time to build correctly. But the evidence is already assembled, Sophia. Your grandmother made sure of that. We're just presenting what already exists. How long? 6 to 8 weeks to have something formal? Possibly faster. Another pause, and this one felt more careful. You mentioned your brother's wedding. Saturday. That's 5 days. Yes. Do you want to wait until after? I thought about my mother's voice on the phone that morning. Nothing belongs to you that we didn't allow. I thought about my brother in that conference room saying that's not right about a will that was clearly and correctly right. I thought about $280,000 I had given to people who had spent 13 years pretending not to hear me. No, I said. I don't want to wait. Indeed. In the meantime, life did what it does. I had a presentation on Thursday for a financial services firm in Midtown. A 4-hour working session on integrating AI assisted risk modeling into their existing compliance framework. I ran it from a conference room on the 43rd floor while simultaneously trading texts with Patricia Monroe about document authentication timelines. My assistant, a sharp 24-year-old named Jerome, noticed I was distracted. He waited until the client had left, then said, "You okay, Sophia?" "I'm fine." "You checked your phone 11 times during the risk assessment module." "I was counting? It's my job to notice things." I looked at him for a moment. Jerome had started with me 18 months ago, fresh out of NYU's data science program, and he had the particular quality I valued most in a junior colleague. He asked questions when something was wrong instead of pretending everything was fine. "I'm dealing with something personal," I said. "A legal matter. I'm fine, but thank you for asking." He nodded once. "If you need anything." That was all. That was enough. On Friday evening, the day before the wedding, Patricia Monroe emailed me a packet of documents, digitally notarized, organized into a tabbed PDF, and also printed and bound in a navy blue folder. 22 pages in total. Page 1, the certified copy of Grand's original deed of title. Pages 2 through 4, the forensic handwriting analysis comparing the genuine signature on the deed to the forged signature on the 2010 transfer, prepared by a document examiner who had been retained by Gerald Aldridge in 2010 and whose report had been waiting in that file for 13 years. Pages 5 through 8. First Coast Bank records showing the deposit of $162,000 in April 2010, followed by the withdrawals totaling $159,400 over the subsequent 18 months, all at ATMs registered to the Palmetto Grand Casino in Myrtle Beach. Pages 9 through 12. Palmetto Grand's account records. Robert Thompson's player account, his table records, the dates and amounts, the losses accumulating in a column like a very specific kind of confession. Pages 13 through 15. Harriet Culbreth's written statement, notarized, describing the conversation she had overheard through an open window in July 2007, in which Robert Thompson had told Eleanor Thompson that Sophia doesn't need land, she needs to learn her place in this family. Pages 16 through 22. The chain of title documentation showing the forged transfer, the sale to Carson Realty LLC, and the legal basis for challenging the transfer under South Carolina Code Section 30-7-10, fraudulent conveyance. I read every page. I held the bound copy in my hands for a long time. Then I put it in my bag, laid out the dress I had bought for a wedding I had been uninvited to, and went to sleep. The Hargrove Building on West 57th Street had a doorman named Marcus, who had been there for 11 years and who recognized me from the months I had spent arranging the purchase. He didn't ask why I was there without an invitation. He called upstairs, listened, and then held the elevator door for me. 32nd floor, he said. Thank you, Marcus. The wedding had been held at 2 in the afternoon in the penthouse itself. The wraparound terrace decorated in white roses and eucalyptus, fairy lights strung along the railing, the kind of event that cost more to execute than most people's annual salary. I arrived at 4:17 p.m., post-ceremony, as the reception was moving into its third hour. The terrace was lit against the darkening sky, the city sprawling south and east below it, Central Park, a dark rectangle to the north. I counted 41 people in the space as I stepped through the glass doors from the interior salon. Tables with white linens, a bar along the inner wall, a string quartet in the corner playing something I didn't recognize. My mother saw me first. She was standing with a group of women near the roses at the north railing, a champagne flute in her hand, wearing a cream-colored sheath dress. Her face when she saw me performed a rapid sequence of expressions, surprise, then a flash of something almost frightened, then the smoothing over into the composed mask she had worn my entire life. She crossed the terrace in 15 seconds. Sophia. Her voice was low, controlled, shaped for a room full of people. You were not invited. I know, I said. I came anyway. This is not appropriate. You need to leave. I'll leave, I said. I just want to say hello to Ethan first. She stepped closer. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you are going to embarrass this family in front of Camille's people, and I will not. Laura. My father appeared at her shoulder, taller and more deliberate. He had the look he put on at family functions, the one that said, I am a reasonable man in a reasonable situation. What's going on? Sophia is here, my mother said, as though this was an emergency that required a code response. My father turned to me. Sophia, you weren't invited. So I've been told. I held the bag at my side. Dad, I'm not here to make a scene, I promise you. He studied me for a moment. Then, as if satisfying himself that he had the upper hand, fine, say hello to your brother and then go. I found Ethan near the bar with Camille. He was in a navy suit, tie loosened the way he did after an hour at any formal event, looking pleased with himself in the particular way he had since childhood. Not happy exactly, but satisfied that things had arranged themselves to his advantage. Camille was in a cathedral-length gown, warm and lovely, completely unaware that her wedding venue had been purchased by the woman now standing 3 feet away. I felt sorry for her. I want to say that clearly. Camille was not part of any of this. Ethan looked at me the way he had looked at me since we were children, with the reflexive condescension of someone who had been told repeatedly that he was the important one. Sophia. He said my name the way my mother said it, with the faintest suggestion of a problem. What are you doing here? Saying congratulations, I said. Genuinely. Camille, you look beautiful. Camille said thank you with warmth she meant. Ethan looked at me like he was waiting for the other shoe. He didn't have to wait long. My mother had followed me. My father was behind her. Several guests had noticed the little cluster forming and were beginning to pay attention the way people do when they sense something about to shift in the temperature of a room. My mother said, in a voice she had pitched to carry just enough, Sophia, whatever you're thinking, I'd like you to remember that your grandmother's wishes have been honored. That property was properly handled. You've been compensated for your contribution to this family. I'd like you to remember that this is a celebration. She said it to me, but she said it to the room. She said it because she wanted there to be witnesses to the version she was already constructing. 41 people on the terrace, string quartet pausing between songs, the city silent 23 stories below. My father added lower. You've always tried to make yourself the center of things, Sophia. That's the pattern. That's what your grandmother never understood about you. You were never satisfied. You always wanted more than your share. More than my share, I said. I didn't raise my voice. What was my share? You were provided for. You were supported. What was my share? I said again, the same volume, the same register. Tell me. Say it out loud in front of everyone. Ethan stepped forward. He had the confidence of someone who had never had to doubt that a room would take his side. The property was handled after Grand's estate. It was a family asset, and it was managed like a family asset. You were 19. You didn't understand the situation. I understood the will, I said. I was in the room. Gran wasn't well at the end. That's incorrect, I said. I have Dr. Marcus Webb's physician's certification, dated September 2008, confirming Eleanor Thompson was in full cognitive health. Would you like to see it? The first silence. It was maybe 2 seconds long, but in those 2 seconds, I watched Ethan's confidence do something complicated. Not collapse, not yet, but shift, like weight redistributing on a structure that wasn't sure it could hold. I don't know what I have the certified deed of title from Aldridge and Monroe, signed by Eleanor Thompson in September 2008, naming me as sole beneficiary of 14 Merritt Pond Road, Beaufort, South Carolina. I opened the bag. I took out the navy folder. I have a forensic handwriting analysis performed by a certified document examiner comparing the authentic signature on that deed with the forged signature on the 2010 transfer. My mother's hand tightened on her champagne flute. I watched her knuckles go pale. I have First Coast Bank records showing a deposit of $162,000 to an account held by Robert Thompson in April 2010, 14 months after Eleanor Thompson's death, 38 days after a fraudulent deed transfer moved the property out of her estate and into your joint names. I turned to my father. I kept my voice even. I have Palmetto Grand Casino records showing $159,400 withdrawn from that account over the next 18 months. Table records, ATM logs, dates and amounts. The string quartet had stopped. Someone near the railing said, very quietly, "Oh my God." My father's face had gone the color of the white tablecloths. He opened his mouth. He closed it. "Robert," my mother's voice, and it was not composed anymore. It was scraped down to something underneath. "Robert, I have Harriet Culbrath's notarized statement," I continued, describing the conversation she overheard in July 2007 in which you, Dad, told my grandmother that I didn't need land, that I needed to learn my place in this family. Ethan made a sound that was not quite a word. "That's enough," my father said. And the volume he used was a mistake, because it was too loud for a quiet room, and it made everyone on the terrace look directly at him. "Patricia Monroe at Aldridge, and Monroe has already filed a complaint with the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office for forgery, identity theft, and grand larceny," I said. "The Register of Deeds is processing the title challenge as of yesterday morning. This is not something I'm threatening to do. This is something that is already happening." I held the folder out, not to my parents. I set it on the nearest table, the one closest to where I was standing, where a man and a woman I didn't know were sitting very still with the expressions of people who wished they could become invisible. "That's for anyone who wants to review the documentation," I said. "You," Ethan started, and whatever he had intended to say, it didn't come. He looked at the folder, then he looked at my father. "Dad, what is she?" "She's lying," my father said. But the conviction was already wrong in it. The way a note goes wrong when a singer has already heard themselves go flat. "She's always done this. She makes trouble and she lies and she tries to—" "The documents are in the folder," I said. "The documents tell the truth." Isondistis. A woman near the roses. One of Camille's people, I thought, from the way she was watching with the clear eyes of someone who had no stake in the Thompson family narrative, said to the person beside her without quite lowering her voice, "Did she say the sheriff's office?" My mother turned to the room. She made one last attempt. She squared her shoulders and she said, in the carrying voice, "This is a family matter that has been deeply misunderstood. Sophia has always had difficulty accepting—" "Laura!" The voice came from the east end of the terrace, near the doors to the interior. I turned. I didn't know him. He was in his early 70s, silver-haired, in a dark suit, with a bearing that belonged to a courtroom or a boardroom. He was looking at my mother with an expression of mild, implacable disappointment. "I think," he said, "you should stop talking now." My mother stared at him. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" "My name is Philip Beaumont," he said, "Camille's grandfather. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing for 40 years in South Carolina and New York." He crossed the terrace slowly, hands in his pockets, and stopped at the table where I had placed the folder. He picked it up. He opened it. He looked at the first 3 pages for about 45 seconds. Then he looked at my father. "These documents appear to be in order," he said. He said it the way an attorney says something when he is preparing everything else he will say afterward. Ethan turned to my father. "Dad? Dad, what did you do?" My father didn't answer. My father was looking at the folder in Philip Beaumont's hands with the expression of a man who has been walking on thin ice for years and has just felt the first fracture. My mother said almost to herself, "We only did what we had to. She was a child. She didn't know what to do with property like that. We were protecting—" "Laura!" My father's voice, and it was the voice I had heard him use when he was genuinely frightened. "Don't!" But it was already out. It was already in the room. We only did what we had to. 41 people on a terrace in the New York City dusk, string quartet silent, white roses trembling slightly in the evening air. My brother looking at my father with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not quite horror, but something related to it. The specific horror of realizing that the person you've been trusting your entire life is not the person you thought. Camille was very still beside him. I looked at her and I almost said something, but there was nothing to say. There was only what there was. I am not here for revenge. I want you to understand that. I picked up my bag from the table. I looked at my parents one final time. My father was not looking at me. My mother was looking at the folder in Philip Beaumont's hands. Neither of them looked like villains in that moment. They looked like people who had just run out of road. "I'm not here for revenge," I said, and I meant it as plainly as I've ever meant anything. "I'm here for the truth. My grandmother spent 8 years making sure I had it. The documents speak for themselves." I looked at Ethan. He was staring at me with the expression of someone who has just understood something retroactively all at once, which is the worst way to understand things. "Congratulations on your wedding," I said. Then I walked through the glass doors, across the interior salon, to the elevator. The doors closed. The city dropped below me as I descended. I didn't look back. The weeks that followed were administrative in their grief, which is the particular quality of legal processes. Everything documented, time-stamped, filed, cross-referenced, and somehow completely exhausting in its precision. The Beaufort County Sheriff's Office opened a formal investigation within 10 days of Patricia Monroe's filing. My father was interviewed twice, my mother once. The First Coast Bank records and the Palmetto Grand Casino documentation were subpoenaed and confirmed what Gerald Aldridge's notes had already shown. $162,000 deposited, $159,400 withdrawn, across 18 months, at the same casino, at tables and slots my father had frequented for years before and continued to frequent after. The property title challenge was decided in my favor 8 weeks later. The 2010 transfer was voided as fraudulently executed. Carson Realty, LLC, which had since developed the 6 acres into a small residential subdivision and no longer owned the property itself, was notified. A civil judgment for the sale value of $180,000, plus interest, was entered against my parents. The house on Merritt Pond Road was gone, of course. The oaks were gone. Someone had built 4 ranch-style houses where the pond used to be. You cannot undevelop 6 acres of South Carolina land. You can only receive what the law says the land was worth, plus the years it was taken from you. And that is not the same thing. It is never the same thing. I sat with that for a long time. My father called me in the 4th week. He called from a number I didn't recognize. He had gotten a new phone. And when I answered, his voice had the quality of a man who has been sleeping badly for a month. "Sophia," he said. "Dad." A long pause. "I need you to understand. We were going to... Eventually, we were going to..." "What?" I said. "Eventually what?" He didn't have an answer. "I'm going to need you not to call this number again," I said. My voice was even. I had practiced it, not in front of a mirror, but in the way you practice things by living long enough to know what they require. "If there are legal matters, your attorney can contact Patricia Monroe. If there's an emergency, Ethan has my email. Sophia, please." "Goodbye, Dad." I ended the call. I sat for 4 minutes and 30 seconds on the couch in my apartment in the East Village, watching the afternoon light come through the windows, and I let myself feel every part of what that conversation was. Then I got up and made coffee and opened my laptop to the proposal I was writing for a client in Seattle. I went to Beaufort 6 months after the title judgment. I drove, which took 10 hours and which I needed, the miles of highway giving me something to do with my hands and my body, while my mind worked through what I was going toward. I stopped once for gas in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and ate a turkey sandwich at a picnic table outside, watching a family of sparrows work over the crumbs near the trash can. Gran's house was gone. In its place was a beige ranch with a concrete driveway and a basketball hoop in the front. A child's bicycle leaned against the garage. The new owners had planted marigolds along the front walk. I didn't stop there. I drove down to the county road that bordered where the back acreage used to be, and I parked on the shoulder, and I sat with the windows down. The air smelled like salt and pine and something green. You could still hear the red-winged blackbirds. I found the cemetery 2 miles north on Palmetto Lane, a small Baptist cemetery behind a white church, well-kept, old stones and newer ones mixed. Gran's stone was granite, simple, with just her name and the years and beloved beneath them. I sat on the grass in front of it for a long time. I told her about the letter, about Patricia Monroe and Gerald Aldridge's careful notes in blue ink, about the forensic examiner and the casino records, and Philip Beaumont on the terrace in the New York City evening light. I told her that the land was gone, but the truth was not. I told her I had come back. "I will always find you, little star," I said, and I said it to the stone and to the sky and to the red-winged blackbirds in the cattails 30 yards south, because the land was gone, but the sound of those birds was hers and always would be. There's a photograph on the desk in my home office that I keep in a small silver frame. It's a photograph I had printed from a scan of the original, a square snapshot from the early 1980s, long before I was born, of Gran in her 20s, sitting on the porch of the house at Merritt Pond Road, both oaks visible in the background, a cup of something in her hands, looking directly at the camera with an expression that contains, if you look at it long enough, the full weight of someone who has decided something. I look at it sometimes when I'm between things, when a project is finished and the next one hasn't started yet. When it's early and the city is quiet and the light comes through my windows at the specific angle it comes in November, I look at it and I think, she planned this. For 8 years she planned this. She knew she would be gone. She knew what they would do. And she did not rail against it or dissolve into helplessness. She got out a pen and she wrote a letter and she called her attorney and she made sure. That is not grief. That is love, operating past its own expiration date. It's been 14 months since the wedding. I am still a senior AI strategy consultant at Meridian Group. I received a promotion in October, managing director, effective January 1st. With a salary I don't need to state, and a team of 6 I'm genuinely proud of, including Jerome, who is now handling his own client accounts and who still notices when I check my phone too many times. I have a 2-bedroom apartment in the East Village that I have slowly and deliberately made into the place I want to come home to. There are books on real shelves. There is a plant on the kitchen windowsill, a sprawling pothos named privately Merritt after the road. There is a photograph in a silver frame on my desk. I do not speak to my parents. That is a sentence I have had to practice saying without apology. It is not rage that keeps me from them. It is clarity. I know what that relationship costs, and I know what it returns, and the math does not balance. Ethan and I have exchanged 3 emails. They are careful, factual, containing no warmth, but also no hostility. He is working through his own inventory of what he knew and when he knew it. That is his work to do, not mine. Camille sent me a handwritten note 4 months after the wedding. It said, "I didn't know. I want you to know that." I wrote back, "I believe you. We have not spoken since, but the note sits in the same drawer as Gran's letter, and sometimes that's all a thing needs to be, acknowledged, and sat down. If you're watching this, I want to say one thing. Not about forgiveness, not about moving on, not about family being forever or wounds healing with time. I want to say this. The people who are supposed to see you, who are supposed to hold some record of who you actually are, separate from what you can do for them. Sometimes those people fail. Sometimes they fail spectacularly. Sometimes they fail for years, quietly, in the small, ongoing ways that don't look like cruelty from the outside, but accumulate in you like water damage, invisible until something gives. And sometimes the only person who ever really saw you is already gone. But here's what I know now, standing on the other side of it. Being unseen by the wrong people is not the same as being invisible. Those are two completely different conditions, and only one of them is true. Gran saw me. She saw me clearly enough to spend 8 years building a case for my life. She could not protect me while she was alive. But she did the next best thing. She left me the tools to protect myself. That's all anyone can really do for someone they love. Not fix everything, not be there forever, just leave them something to work with. I'm working with it. The morning I drove out of Beaufort to head back to New York, I stopped at a diner on Route 21, a place called the Palmetto Sunrise, counter seating and booths, laminated menus, the smell of coffee and bacon grease and something sweetly fried. The kind of diner I know from the inside. I sat at the counter and I ordered coffee and scrambled eggs, and I watched the morning happen through the plate glass window. The light coming up gold and flat over the low country scrub, a woman walking a dog on the sidewalk, a man opening the hardware store across the street, everything ordinary and unhurried and real. The woman behind the counter refilled my coffee without asking, the way you do when you've done this for years, when you know. I left a $20 tip on a $9 check. She looked at it, then at me. "Thank you, honey," she said. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it for all of it. If you have ever lost something, land, money, trust, a version of your family you thought you had, and someone looked you in the face and said you were wrong about what was yours, type, "I know what's mine," in the comments. Or if you're still in the middle of it, still figuring out what belongs to you and what you've been told to give away, type, "Still figuring it out." Both are exactly where you're supposed to be. Both are valid. If this story meant something to you, check the description for more stories just like this one. Thank you for being here with me tonight.